Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
And welcome back to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. It's a podcast where we break down and celebrate the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. And we are in the midst of Season 1, dedicated to reanimating young Frankenstein. I'm Alan Sanders, your host.
And I'm Walt Murray, your co-host.
And we are so pleased to welcome once again the guys from BK on the Air, the BK on the Air radio show on WBHF, now on our podcast. Welcome back, Barry and Mike.
Thank you. This may be the wilder ride I've had all day.
Yes. This is probably the most fun I've had all week.
I haven't been home tonight yet, though, so I don't know.
I've been home all week.
That's right.
Man, Mrs. BK is going to kill you when she listens to this.
You're going to have to keep her. Honey, did your phone die?
Those guys, the Wilder Ride, they stopped that. They don't do that anymore.
They skipped an entire 5 minutes of the movie. I don't know what happened.
Where were you, and why do you smell of elderberries?
I'm deleting her TuneIn app tonight.
I'm unsubscribing and rid of it. Well, we are here for minute number 64, and it's one of these weeks where everything kind of goes together as one chunk of the movie. But we are now in minute 64. We continue with Frankenstein's monster not very happy with dear old Pops after calling him a rotten brain and hearing Frau Blucher say, "It's not rotten," and she says, "I know what he likes." That's the last thing we left. Well, we'll hear Frank growl, or Frank's monster growl, until he hears a violin, and we will end with Frau Blucher. She's going to let us in on her, I guess, what she considers the relationship between her and Victor from way back when the first monster was first unleashed into the citizens of Transylvania.
Is Frau going to drop the mic?
I don't know.
What is she going to do?
She's certainly got a lot on her mind, and a lot's getting revealed in this minute.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of confirmation, a lot of suspicion. All of it is all. This is it. This is that moment where everything comes out. We're going to learn everything about her, everything that's been questioned, how it got here, everything. This is that come to Jesus moment.
But we're still not going to figure out where that violin came from.
No, we don't know where the violin came from, but we know where it is now.
It is a mystery lost to film history.
And we know where it's going.
Yes.
That's right.
So we start, and I think, again, this is where you guys, your expertise in this area comes will come into play. And so, Mike, I'm going to go to you first. Okay. When he starts playing the violin, he gets this sensation of trying to catch. Is he trying to catch the notes? Is this an allusion to when he was trying to catch butterflies? Is it both? What is this moment representing?
I'm not sure what he's actually trying to catch or what he's seeing. I wondered to myself, are they notes, butterflies? It's a throwback to Bride of Frankenstein, where the hermit plays the violin for the Boris Karloff monster and immediately calms him. And he kind of does the same thing with his hands, but in that movie, he doesn't look like he's trying to catch anything, but he is making some hand motions, and it does calm him. He smiles. I think it's the first time we see the monster smile outside of when he throws the girl in the well in the first movie, or in the lake, rather. So I think that's what they're doing here. And I thought, but I couldn't find this, I need to rewatch the series, that Igor, Bela Lugosi's Igor, in Son and Ghost of Frankenstein, also used a violin to help control the monster, but I couldn't get any confirmation on that before the podcast, so I apologize. Maybe someone in the group will say something.
Well, the only note I could find, but again, I couldn't tell exactly and you'll hear how it's written. Gene Wilder said, Peter Boyle is so innocent, it was his idea to, quote, catch butterflies, and then he says, or it says, in the original Frankenstein, Boris Karloff tried to catch musical notes. So again, I guess that's what he's trying to do, but he says calling him catching butterflies here, but there's no butterflies in the scene, and there's no other scene elsewhere where he's doing this, so I don't know if it's just he's just kind of mishmashing and saying that's what it looks like to him, that he's trying to catch butterflies, but in his mind it's also an allusion to catching the musical notes. But he's obviously entranced. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And this comes into the cliche, music calming the savage beast.
Of course.
I mean, everybody from Bugs Bunny through to Frau Blucher apparently knows that that's what you do when somebody's acting up.
For me, it was a reminder of when I went to the Grateful Dead concert, and there were a bunch of people doing the same thing. I never really did figure out what they were doing or why, but they were trying to catch something in the air.
Smelled funny.
Smelled really odd.
I think they did a little too much LDS.
But man, those people really, they loved mushrooms. They brought a ton of mushrooms with them, so I don't know.
But no steaks. I didn't understand.
It was really weird. I'd never had
always like a good barbecue at a concert. Exactly.
This is a great piece of violin music that they play.
It is.
And
John Morris.
And John Morris, you've got something about that in your facts that leads us into that, because they are playing the music now that you wanted to talk about. This is actually something that I didn't know.
Well, it's very interesting. It's I got this from allmusic.com, so I don't want anybody to think I'm stealing anything. Now, traditionally in horror films, when a violin is used for music, it's something frantic and suspenseful, like you think of, like very evil, like in Psycho, or Danny Elfman did it in Beetlejuice, John Williams in the Witches of Eastwick, Jerry Goldsmith for Gremlins. Well, in this case, John Morris, he gave this violin a lovely, calming, romantic theme, which is known as Transylvanian Rhapsody. It has the ability to calm the monsters. We know. I'm kind of scanning this because I don't want to read the whole thing. Was written in the Hungarian gypsy violin flavor. Now, after the success of the film, Morris provided a concert version of the violin theme, which he called, like I said, the Transylvania Rhapsody. Incidentally, there was an earlier piece of music back in 1941 by the same title, but they are not the same.
Early on, we talked about this. Mel Brooks said he wanted a lullaby. He wanted it to sound like a Eastern lullaby, like from the Russian style of music, the chord structure, and he wanted it to be something that could be used to not only have an effect on the creature, but technically on the original drafts of the script would have an effect on young Frankenstein himself. And here we have her admitting that the music is in all Frankenstein's blood, and that apparently this has always had an effect from Victor Frankenstein all the way down to his creatures, all the iterations, and is having an effect here on young Frankenstein's creation.
Well, and it is a good device to kind of tie all that together, and also to bridge a gap that was left on one of the cutout scenes early in the film that you've talked about, where Dr. Frankenstein was not wanting to go, but then as he walked down the street and they were talking about, no, you need to come, there was a guy on the street playing this song, and it changed his mind.
Right.
He decided to come to Transylvania.
Yeah, there's a whole scene with Herr Falkstein when he brings the will, takes him on a walk, and actually at the very end, Herr Falkstein pays the violinist because he knows that's the only way to change Gene Wilder's character's mind to go actually accept his inheritance. All that got dropped, but that was originally intended for the film.
Well, music is powerful, and we know that. It can certainly soothe me after a hard day's work. I'm sure you guys as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
I will often have something playing in the background when I'm doing like busy work where I'm not really trying to think too hard, or where I need to have like concentration. I'll actually have a lot, especially soundtracks where there's no lyrics, just music. I love hearing that kind of orchestration, but set to, the movies that I love.
It would be hard to live life without music. I've run into one individual in my entire life once that I was talking to this guy many years ago, and he actually admitted to me, I don't like music.
I'm in the room.
No, not you. Not you. You just didn't listen to soundtracks before. You listened to rock and roll and stuff. But no.
Kidding.
That's back when you didn't like girls.
What?
Music. The musical girls.
Oh, no, he always liked them. It's just they didn't necessarily like him.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, that was more.
Get it right.
Now, who here hasn't gone through their experimental phase? Wait, what?
I don't see a show of hands.
Sweet head.
Sweet head. But I couldn't believe this guy told me that he didn't like music, and I've never met anybody since then or before that incident that said they didn't like music. I can understand not liking a certain type of music.
Right, yeah.
But someone who just wasn't music, or not being musical, like not being able to play an instrument or something, or being able to write music. But he just didn't like music. And that was so alien to me when the guy said that to me.
Yeah, no, I've run into a couple of people who are just like, it's not that they hated music, but they never felt compelled to buy or listen.
Right.
I'm just like, how does that work?
Well, and Barry was right. When I was younger, I didn't notice film music a lot until Star Wars. I mean, of course, I remember the Jaws theme and all that, but I never had any real desire to buy a soundtrack and stuff until Star Wars. And then, especially after I got to know him better, I began to realize, wow, this is really good stuff. I really like film music now.
I tied him down,
which is
once.
cool. Yeah. It was
But
that whole scene from Clockwork Orange. That was me.
Only I propped his ears open
Yes,
instead
the
of his
ears.
eyes.
But the other thing is
Listen to this,
too,
Alex.
in this earlier scene when I guess it would be now the second time he hears the violin, because he heard it first when they're walking. Now the second time when they're in the castle, Frederick is kind of frantic to find it. It's like controlling him already. And of course, that's part of her plan. She knows it.
In the Frankenstein.
Well,
Yeah.
and when you know the scene taken out, I mean, of course you could read into it however you want, but if you remember when the violin started playing way back, it caused him to have a nightmare where he started having a conversation with the ghost of what we assumed was Victor, his grandfather,
Yes.
telling him, this is who you are. And he's like, no, destiny, no escaping, that's for me. He was arguing with somebody, and it was all brought on by the violin, because when he awoke, it wasn't the soundtrack we were hearing. We realized it's the actual someone playing the violin. So it has had an effect on him
Oh, yeah.
very early on in this movie. Now, here's something interesting in the spacing, and I want to get into this because there's some lines that we're going to see here that are both good to discuss, but also some lines that were dropped. It's amazing that the way they shot this going back and forth, she's leading the monster slowly up the stairs because he's slowly trying to come after it. So
Yes.
she's acting sort of the Pied Piper. He hits the first couple of steps and falls forward. So he goes below frame. You can see where he kind of like ducks down. And he looks like he's struggling to get up. We never see him stand up. From then on, all we see is the back and forth between Frau Blucher playing as she's backing up, and then Dr. Frankenstein and the crew slowly advancing. We don't know where Frankenstein's monster is in the middle of all this.
It's like they walked around him.
When I watch it and saw it the first few times, I just simply thought she was leading them up the stairs. Because
Yeah,
you're
me
right,
too.
you don't see him at all coming up the stairs.
But he's got to be in between, because by the end we
of this
see
scene,
she's the one. He's the
Right.
one closest to her.
Yeah.
But the focus is not on him because he falls. He
Right.
starts to get up, but after that it goes into medium shot her, medium shot him, medium shot her, back and forth while they're playing this Q&A game.
And it's almost like they're talking through him. If he's
Right.
standing there, you never see him, because when he's down in the scene before, he doesn't fully get back up. So my mind never really registers that he's there, even though he is there.
Yeah, he's either laying on the steps, and he's not standing because they're coming up the stairs.
Right. But but he has to be moving, or they'd be running over him. He has to
That's
be
what I mean.
walking up with them. Let me say something about the editing here, the back and the forth, the questions, her saying yes. That's brilliant the way it's shot. Now, it only works like that over the top, especially in a movie like this, with a comedy. Obviously, this is a comedy and it works. Or a very old 40s love melodrama movie. Because they did it that way in the old days. They'd cut back and forth. John, Marcia. They parodied that scene in a lot of things because that's the way they shot some things back then during drama love stories, too.
Yeah, and I also like how she uses the violin to emphasize each answer.
Right.
I thought that was brilliant.
yes.
Yeah.
Each yes, uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, I want to get to the yeses in just a second, but first let's go through, before we even get to the Q&A, where they're playing this come to terms with all of these mysteries all being unraveled and unveiled. There were some lines here that were taken out. When we started, and last minute it ended with, I know what he likes. The next line Frau Blucher is supposed to deliver is, I know what my angel boy likes. Inga, as she starts to play, says, Doctor, there's that strange music again. The monster, of course, starts to go, because he's happy. Igor, it seems to have stopped the big fellow in his tracks. And then the doctor, Freddy, that music, Frau Blucher, yes. That strange, quaintly tonal folk tune. Frau Blucher, yes, do you like it? Freddy, I don't know. I'm afraid of it, and yet, and she goes, and yet, and this is where we actually come in, she says, it's in your blood. And she takes it from there. It's in the blood of all Frankensteins. It reaches the soul when words are useless. Your grandfather used to play it to the creature he was making. And the monster, of course, says, That's where we start going to the Q&A. Then it was you all this time. Yes. So before we get into the yeses, what do you think about ditching all that dialogue?
Well, I agree that it should have been ditched, because when you ended it and picked up with the what's in the film and the yes, it still works. It still works. I think that what they did get rid of in this movie is a lot of his backstory, is what it sounds like. A lot of the details of his past, and by doing that, they made it more mysterious.
Yeah.
that he's finding out along with us in the film who he is.
Yeah, I think
it works better that way.
I think all she has to say is it's in the blood. It's the music that affects all Frankensteins. It's in your blood, and then we backfill in our minds and go, that's why the nightmare. That's why he was drawn to it. That's why he was, it was easy to pull him down. We didn't need all of the Herr Falkstein paying off a gypsy in the road. We didn't need to be told all of this exposition. We can figure it out.
And in this case, I don't think any of that was filmed. That's just the earlier script version that you're talking about, right?
A lot of this was filmed. This was the final blessed revision 3 that went to production. So it's fun to kind of go through and watch and see what was every now and then ad-libbed, but for the most part, what was removed.
And we've watched a lot of movies where we would see the special edition of a lot of films, and some of them work better with extra scenes put back in, and some of them bring it down a little bit and don't really add much. Case in point is one of them was Aliens, is that way. But another one that worked in just the opposite way was James Cameron's The Abyss. If you've ever seen James Cameron's The Abyss, the special director's edition, it is almost a different film from the original film.
It certainly puts a different feel to the ending.
It does, and I thought,
and actually makes it feel more complete.
Me too. I thought it was better. Now, Aliens extra scenes to me don't work as well.
There was one.
Well, there was one,
but
overall,
machine gun.
They left them all out, and
which was
fine,
smart.
Which is fine.
Yeah,
but in this film, it sounds like the same thing.
Which we talked about since we went down the rabbit trail. I love almost all the director's cut from Aliens, except the whole opening scene that takes away all the tension.
Yeah,
of
you know what happened.
LV-426.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you could have ditched that one. There are some movies that actually do better. I do like what they did when they reshot Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner, where they were able to go back and mask some of the bad stuntmen.
Right.
The man in the wig that was like, that's not Joanna Cassidy. When did it turn into a man with meaty thighs? I'm like, ooh. But, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
But I think this Young Frankenstein is edited fine. I don't feel like I missed anything watching this film at all.
Well, and when you look at a film like this, and one that stands out in my mind is the 2009 Star Trek, which was filmed during a writer's strike. So they had to go with the rigid script that they had, and they couldn't on set go, it would sound better if you said this, or can we rewrite this part? They had to go with what they had. Where here you can see how dynamic it is, and they're making changes on the move, and you see how much better it works. Because I think that there are some parts in 2009, I think we'd all agree with the Star Trek 2009, that there are some parts that we're like, that really came across a little awkward and boxy. Yeah, no. Other than Alan, who blindly accepts the...
So BK, you're slowly ranking up here, in the co-host fill-in spot. So.
Wow. I guess I'd better stop.
He dangles $1,000 bill.
I would say
I better stop.
parts of 2009, because I like 2009, but I think there are parts that could have been better. But you see, as they're working through this, both in production and in editing, where they really get it right. They really do a great job.
Especially when Alan will read some of the original script, and I would go, well, that's interesting to hear.
Right.
But I'm kind of glad a lot of that isn't in here. Now, I want to pose another question as they're walking up the stairs here. They're walking up the stairs. She's playing the violin. They're cutting back and forth to the funny, back and forth play here. What is at the bottom of the stairs when they start to walk up? I want to know what that is. You look at the bottom of the stairs when they begin to walk up, and there's something on the floor at the very first step. And I'm wondering what that is. To me, it looks like it might be either a wastebasket or an accordion. But I can't really tell what that is. I mean, take a look at it.
Maybe a small dog.
You folks, it could have been anything. But that's the two things I narrowed it down to. But when they first start to walk up, there's something right there at the bottom of the stairs. Right there.
So right around second 27 or 28.
Right. I don't know what that is. I mean, you could pause it there, look at it, do what you need to do, but I really can't tell what that is. And we may never find out what it is, but I can't tell. Maybe we need to look at it on a theater screen. Yeah. We might be able to see that. But it looks like
some kind of basket.
Again, it looks like maybe an old style accordion. It looks like some little tires in a stack or something. But it's right there.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. The closest would be that style of hand accordion you kind of see.
Right, that's what I mean.
Like
that's what I'm talking
about. When you're in
the
Venice,
old,
and they're kind of like playing the little,
for a little money.
We're going to play like
with the monkey.
The meatballs and the spaghetti with Lady and the Tramp, and he's like,
what you're postulating here, BK, if I'm hearing you right, is that scattered throughout this room are a variety of instruments.
There could be. There's
And it just
one there.
so happened that when she needed a violin,
Right.
she was standing in the violin
Right.
section.
How funny and different the movie would have been. How funny and different the movie would have been had she played the accordion and not the violin.
Yeah, the little monkey grinder accordion.
Yeah. That's right.
The little
So,
monkey would have run in the room. And
Great.
Frederick runs around like a monkey, and she plays it.
So
All
it
the
was
Frankensteins are monkeys.
the monster violin, the monkey grinder thing. There, somewhere in the room, there's a little mouse drum.
That's right. Yeah. But anyway, that's what it looks like to me. It's either a waste paper basket or a accordion.
Big gong in the one corner.
Thank God she wasn't in the tuba section. We got
or a giant harp.
Where there's a big fat lizard.
we got
It's the worst instrument you can try to move around in the room is a harp.
we all of a sudden turn into Oktoberfest with this Oompa music going up the stairs.
Well, you're close to Germany. But not
Yep.
far. Austria, Transylvania, they're in Europe.
Got to add a tambourine in there somewhere.
I'm up for the beer. But anyway,
Well,
whatever
can you
that is, I
imagine
don't know.
if she had
I don't
been
know
standing
what
near
that
the
is.
harp when that happened? She has to tune up. And
I'm just thinking how funny the word would be. The tuba's still warm. Someone's been playing it. Yeah, their
warm.
mouth was on it.
Yes, that's why. It's still wet
You know, you could drain a brass instrument out by blowing it, and all the spittle comes
Oh,
out.
God.
Of it.
man, why am I standing next to the bassoon? This screws this whole movie up.
That's terrible. Anyway, I was just wondering what that was at the base of the steps. I don't know.
Big xylophone.
Well, thankfully, it didn't send us down a little rabbit hole.
Oh, no.
It was
That
a
never
hole,
happened.
but it wasn't that deep. Yeah, you're right. So that's just wondering. It is the podcast.
So since we are now moving up the stairs, and we now Frankenstein, for whatever reason, Frankenstein's creature is certainly staying ducked down low, or creative camera angles, we forget he's between the trio, slowly following Frau Blucher as she's backing up the stairs. Am I the only one who hears the yes, yes, yes as being something more than answering of questions?
Yes.
No, I don't get it.
Well,
Not sure what you're referring
I don't know
to.
what you're talking about.
oh, these are the people.
I mean, you've got the bow pounding up and down the violin, and she's yelling yes every time that thing is banging on the. I
And
mean,
we
it's
are
just
talking about Victor.
yes.
Victor.
Victor.
Well,
And
and
when she says, say it, all she
she
had to do was
is,
say my name.
Say my name.
Well. By the way, you say, all that extra dialogue that they cut is
Yeah.
good. Think of the logistics of that. How how slowly they would have had to move up that staircase and how
Right.
stupid that would have looked, or how big that staircase would have had to been to cover that.
like 300 steps.
Exactly.
I just think in terms of pacing, more often than not, when they get rid of a lot of this exposition, it really keeps things crisp and moving.
Oh, yeah.
Because we just jump straight to Freddy recognizing that it was you all the time. Yes, you played the music in the middle of the night. Yes, to get us into the laboratory. Yes, that was your cigar smoldering in the ashtray. Yes, and it was you who left my grandfather's book out for me to find. Yes, so that I would. Yes, and that you and Victor were. Yes, yes. He was my boyfriend!
Okay, I get it now. I got to smoke a cigarette.
Yep. Got a little warm in here.
Yeah.
What a cigar.
So, which is also kind of funny because it goes with this movie that even that understates, it's not as big or it wasn't fiance or husband or lover or whatever. It's boyfriend.
You're going exactly what I was going to say.
Yep.
She could have said anything. She could have said, my one true love. She could have said, my one and only beloved. Something like that. Much more proper. No, she said, he was my boyfriend. Very un-European-like.
Yeah.
And very funny as hell.
Yeah,
No,
and it's
because
kind of
it's
like
so out of place.
high school dating.
He wore my class ring. I wore his class ring.
Right,
That's
it's almost the juvenile way of describing a true relationship.
Exactly.
Yep.
It wasn't, my true love. It was my
It
boyfriend.
was like my boyfriend, yeah?
What do you think? It's almost a throwback to when Frederick says, my grandfather's work was doo-doo?
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
It's kind of that
Uh-huh.
same. Yeah, it's that same feel that it's kind
Right.
of understated.
It doesn't seem right coming from that person's mouth.
It's not an adult statement.
And you say that about the scene where he does say his work is doo-doo. He did say that at the beginning of the film in his lab, right?
Yes.
Where the kid...
in the medical
right.
school.
Okay. Let me also say that we may have covered it already, but I think this movie is also a time travel film. Because in the beginning of this film, it is set in 1974.
Yeah.
Because when you look in the room, you see the modern exit sign above the door. Mm-hmm. Everything is set in the 70s. It's there.
Yeah.
But as this movie progresses, it progressively goes back in time.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Because there's not one other modern reference in this film for the rest of the film once he gets to Europe.
I mean, the most modern thing at this point is the cars. And those are 32s.
Well, even they're pre-70. They're old.
Yeah, they're old. That's what I'm saying. They're all
back
old.
in time. There's nothing 70s.
Oh no, there's nothing
left
70s
in the film.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's where when she says, "Do you want some Ovaltine?" That strikes us as weird all of a sudden.
Yeah. Oh wait, we're back in the 70s.
That's a 70s reference, you know?
Right. So
and it's almost like that train ride.
That was the time trip.
That was the time trip.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what I've always thought.
From then on, it is all 1930s
or even 1800s.
But they still wink and nod to the fact that it's still in this current time,
right?
Because Igor, when he meets him on the platform, says, "Of course, the rates have gone up. Since our grandfathers worked together." Well, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, of course,
right?
Yeah, certainly.
Right, but it's still not a reference to the present day, though. It's still not. There's no 70s.
No, but they reference the fact that they realized that there was a past.
Right, that time has passed. But still, it doesn't look like it has. Nothing's...
Well, no, and you're right. It's almost like Transylvania is stuck in this one moment in time.
Right.
And
it may have been conscious to do that.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
Well,
even though
in
it's
this
1974. They still think it's 1933.
Yeah, right. Well, even in the scene, the clothing that they're wearing.
Yes.
Right. He's wearing kind of that smoking jacket.
Every bit of it.
Yeah, everything is a throwback.
Is a throwback, so yeah. Time travel.
Which makes it actually fun because when things that you would expect to be in 1974 are mentioned, it feels anachronistic. Like they weren't supposed to mention it. They weren't supposed to have a reference.
Right.
They weren't supposed to do those things. It's like, wait a minute, we're back in like at least the 30s, if not maybe even before the 30s, right? But then if it's before the 30s, how do they have a 1927 or a 1933 car, whichever it is?
Right.
It can't be the late 1800s, which is when Mary Shelley would have said her book. So it's like time makes no sense whatsoever. Everything, just throw it all together and hit smoothie.
We've got primitive electrical equipment.
Right. But then we also have a generator that can put all the wattage together that we need for regeneration.
Speaking of the primitive equipment that gets set off here and kind of explodes at the very end of our minute here, I didn't notice until we started doing the Wilder Ride podcast with these two gentlemen here. By the way, did you notice that I don't know if you guys have checked, but the Young Frankenstein rating on Rotten Tomatoes has gone up 2 points since you started this podcast.
Success.
Yep.
I don't know if that's what it means, but I'm just saying it was 2 points lower before this podcast started.
Somebody owes us a royalty check.
That's right.
That's
We're going to have to check into
or at least a visit to our show. Hashtag Mel, please join us.
Isn't it great? Isn't it interesting?
Hashtag Mel Brooks, please come join us.
Please don't sue us. Please come join us.
Interesting that this panel here behind him, you'll see it earlier as they walk up behind Frau, that it's stamped with the words "The Works."
Yes, I was going to mention that.
Did you see
that?
And
we had noticed that when they were throwing the switch earlier.
So you saw it earlier.
But
that
it
was switch number 3.
Like 1 second. But
that's
also,
The Works, man.
I didn't notice it at the time, but I noticed it now.
You really see it clear in this scene.
You do, and the other 2 switches are just kind of normal, smaller switches,
and they don't have anything above them.
No, they
nothing
don't
at all.
But the Works is a huge switch.
I know that's the final.
That's the third switch where he's like, throw the third switch. No, master, not the third switch. Throw it, I say.
Now,
give him the works.
Does the monster back into the switch here? Is that what sets it off?
I think so.
No, it's not the switch. It's this big giant capacitor in the corner for some reason.
He hits it.
He bumps, and then, I was going to say, at the very last instant of this minute, after the crescendo, because let's face it, after we hit the yes, he was my boyfriend, all the sparks and the shower and the Well, the Shangri-La moment has hit for Frankenstein.
Was that more symbolism?
Yes, I believe so.
After the Blucher orgasm.
I believe
Exactly.
I believe he hit the crescendo.
Wow.
But here's the funny thing, and this brought up a big question.
And it's going
for me.
everywhere. That's a big boy.
Oh,
That is a
sweet
big
head
boy.
again.
Well, all the switches are on off.
Mhm.
I was noticing that as they walked up the stairs, everything is off, including the works. So, is there that much electricity
Well, I
on just
guess
an
he hit
open
something
circuit?
live. He
That's
hit
the
something live
reason
behind it.
and there's nothing in front of it saying warning.
No, well, that's
right.
Don't lean on this.
That goes back to the fact that there is no labor unions out here. There's
Yeah, the
nobody
union
checking. There's no
really needs
building
to get involved
inspectors.
here.
And plus, if your switches even now on anything are off, you can still go out there and touch the live transformer and get the crap
True.
blasted out of
Right.
it.
Well,
for sure.
that's why I called it a capacitor, which is basically something on a circuit board that stores electricity so it can build a lot stronger and fire the current. So that's what capacitors
but
do.
not a flux capacitor because that's another
Right.
podcast.
No, that
I was
does.
gonna
It
say,
just fluxes.
Maybe that
Okay.
pulls that world into
Maybe
this
that's the
world.
time
Well, that's the time travel
There you
now.
go.
It's all coming together.
It's a primitive.
It
It's
doubles.
a primitive flux capacitor.
And they were bigger back
So
then.
is this a prequel to Back to the Future? Is that what we're saying?
I don't know. Or Back to
No,
the Future.
It's a Back to the Future story.
We don't like to use that word prequel around here.
No, it's not. It's,
Yeah,
it's a
that's
side
true.
story, so it's a Back to the
That's-
Future
It's a
story.
side quote.
The prequels never work out well.
No, they never work out very
Well, whatever he backs into, and I do think that you would call this just a giant old-fashioned capacitor that's designed to store a giant electrical charge to give a bolt when you need it. Whatever. Now, there's no metal on him except for the zipper on his neck. But I don't-
Yeah.
whatever he does, he has fired it off. I wish I knew how they did this particular practical effect. I don't know how Peter Boyle doesn't have flash burns on his back and his neck.
yeah.
And if you watch, it's really hard. You have to put it in almost frame by frame. Sparks shower all over the actors from wherever this shower of electricity and explosion happens that sends, which will be in the next minute, the creature into a rage. We end literally with him looking like he's nearly on fire and the cast all shielding their eyes and having to back away.
Well, that's the mark of good filmmakers, making you believe something happened and our actors are in peril when they actually aren't. So they did a good job at that.
Yeah. There's like that scene in Wrath of Khan, we were talking about that earlier, where Khan hits the Enterprise in that one hallway and it is
And the
totally
stuntman
engulfed in
just
flame. How the
blows up.
stuntman was not killed in this
And he's
scene.
on fire. So
I
they
have no
figure
idea.
If Hollywood does their job well,
Yes.
it looks really good.
And then yet a Christmas light pops during a Pepsi commercial and Michael Jackson catches on
Yeah,
fire.
why is that? Can't control it.
Well, that's too much product.
Just beat it.
Yeah.
Too much hair product.
Could be.
So I'm just gonna kind of just watch these last 2 or 3 seconds when she yells boyfriend and he hits it. You can see, and we'll see moving into the next even, the sparks literally arc over everything.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable that
huge
somebody didn't
explosion.
get hurt.
And when I first saw this, I thought when she flings her hands up, I thought she had turned the switch on. I thought she'd accidentally hit it back when I saw it many years ago.
Right.
But that's obviously not what happens.
It just makes me wonder where was Frankenstein's creature during this entire walk up the stairway that all of a sudden the sudden revelation that she had a boyfriend, does it freak him out? Did the scream because she stopped playing, because she put her arms like this? Is that what made him back up into the capacitor?
That's probably what it was. Because
Probably.
number one, she quit playing the music, which soothes him. And then he can sort of understand words.
Yeah.
Seems to at least
So-
understand
well,
tone.
Yeah.
Well, and he definitely understood when Freddie said his brain is bad.
It's
A
rotten.
rotten brain.
Yeah, his brain is rotten.
It's a
Yeah.
rotten brain. Oh, Dad.
Yeah.
I hate you too.
Not that rotten.
Oh, yeah?
You're rotten.
I'm not rotten. You're rotten. You made me.
Yeah, it's all your fault.
You guys are reminding me of the teenage Groot.
Yeah, right.
in the Guardians of the Galaxy here on at the time of this recording.
Language.
I'm not
That was a great line. Well, the other thing that I noticed about this minute too, the great facial expressions between the two of them as they're headed up the stairs. Dr. Frankenstein, I guess, still at this point, has just a wild look on his face, and Cloris Leachman just has such an intensity on her face too. And we've talked about this before, how this is a comedy, and yet this is being acted and worked out in such a fantastic way.
It is, because what's
Such
comedic
passion.
is it's a little over the top, because nobody would really act this way, and yet we're not laughing. It's not funny, haha, grab your sides, but it's this. I love this moment because this truly is getting ready to close Act 2 of this 3-act structure, because We're getting all of our mysteries solved, all of our doubts or all of our suspicions confirmed, and at this point we move forward to now a monster on the loose.
Yep. The rampaging monster.
Which is, of course, Act 3.
Yep.
Yes.
What always happens.
All right, well, before we wrap up minute 64 then, Walt, anything more you've got that we need to talk about here in this particular scene?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is such a loaded minute. I mean, there's just so much here. But, again, the great acting and the powerful emotion that we begin to feel with that little drop of, he's my boyfriend. Yeah, it's funny how they're able to combine these two and yet keep you on the edge of your seat as we're moving through this scene. This, I have to say, I don't know what the movie's rated now. Hopefully we had something to do with it going up 2 points on Rotten Tomatoes. But the more I watch this movie, the more impressed I am and the more moved I am by how much work they put into it and how much love they put into it. And what a just absolutely fantastic movie this is. You know, it was my favorite Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder movie before we started, and it just continues to climb on my scale.
You know, without trying to make light, this is the same thing as Frau Blucher feels. This is Mel Brooks's and Gene Wilder's love letter to Frankenstein. This movie. And it feels like it.
Oh, yeah.
It really does.
Yeah, because
It
they're
really
not
does.
mocking it.
Right.
They are paying tribute
Oh,
to it.
yeah, no, not at all.
They could have easily made this movie and made fun of the film.
Oh, yeah,
Someone
right.
else could have. And people have done that with a genre films before.
Which is why we think Dracula Dead in Love and it doesn't work, because it does not feel like a love letter to it.
No, it
It's
doesn't.
like they're making fun of it.
It's ridiculous. So.
BK, anything more you've got on this minute?
Nothing, just other than Cloris Leachman really shines in this particular scene in the last two that we've gone through, and looking forward to minute 65 coming up.
Mike, anything more on your end?
Just kind of to add what Walt said, especially when they're doing the revelation back and forth, it's a very intense scene, and it's also a very absurd scene, but it works perfectly. And but that's it. And you're right. I think the acting here especially is great, and the "he was my boyfriend" line is my girlfriend's favorite line in the film. Just the way Cloris Leachman delivers it, the ridiculousness of it. She just thinks that is so funny.
Yeah.
Last note I've got is if you're on Mustache Watch, Mustache Watch.
Right.
We're back to the reverse Hitler, the real big wide gap above the middle of his lip. It's like some real, like the mustache has been applied way too wide on his lip, which is completely different than it was earlier. But that's what happens when, you know, you're filming things out of order. Sometimes, things that are groomed like that just get groomed a little differently each time. So,
And the eyeliner that Gene Wilder uses in this film
Oh my gosh,
is
it's
very
crazy.
stark, and it does show up again too in his World's Greatest Lover movie that he directs as well, which we may cover in the future. And it's very prominent and very old
funny you
Hollywood
mentioned
looking.
that. We talked about this in a previous minute. Wilder did not fashion his performance on Colin Clive, as we know.
Right.
Instead, he, quote, mimicked the refined English actors of Robert Donat and Leslie Howard, including loungewear, eyeliner, and everything to evoke a 30s matinee idol.
And he
I
pulls
can
it off.
see that.
Yeah,
I
he
can
pulled
see
it
that.
off.
So that was an intentional move to give it more of that feel.
He's very John Barrymore in it.
Yeah, it
Right?
does.
You look at Barrymore and a lot
He's
of
got
Barrymore
that
stuff.
sense. All right. Well, before we tell you what's coming up tomorrow to close out the week, BK, people who want to learn a little bit more about your radio show, your actual live radio show, not podcast, where can they go?
Well, thanks for having us. As always, we love being here on the Wilder Ride, but you can hear us too, if you so wish, every Saturday from 10 a.m. till noon Eastern on WBHF Radio. You can hear us on WBHFradio.org, stream it on your computer or any other device you might have, or download the TuneIn app free if you want the free side and listen to us there. Just search for WBHF and you'll hear BK on the air. We talk about movies, comic books, television, things from the old days that you remember growing up, 10 lunch boxes, a little geeky, nostalgic monkey business every Saturday morning, and we have a good time doing it.
And you got a Facebook page too, don't
We
you?
have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, and a Twitter page. Check us out. Just put in BK on the air and you'll find us.
And you'll find it.
And you're the only show that had a former DC actor reviewing a Marvel movie.
That's true. Michael Gray from Shazam reviewed Avengers
He's
for us. That
actually
was pretty
reviewed
fun,
2
so-
Marvel movies
That's
for us.
right.
He has.
That's kinda
Panther
cool.
and
after he did it,
and,
the world still exists. It didn't explode.
Avengers.
So that's
Crazy.
good.
Crazy.
That's awesome. So
Well-
he liked them.
Somebody wants to learn a little bit more about us or add to the conversation in social media, where can they go?
Come join us over on Facebook at facebook.com. I always want to say www. I'm getting better. Facebook.com/The Wilder Ride. You can join the conversation there. You can join our listeners group. And there is just some fantastic conversations going on there that we'd love for you to be a part of. Also, you can go to our website, which is always the best place to find everything about us at www.thewilderride.com, and find all of our different sites and places to come look for us.
Guys, since you've been here 4 days of the last week, do you mind capping out Friday with us tomorrow?
Can't make it tomorrow. Sorry.
All right.
No,
Good
wait a minute.
riddance.
No, wait a minute.
Tired.
No, yeah, we can.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I forgot what day it
Tell
was.
you what, you guys, I got a couple of spare sleeping bags in the back. We can
That's
order some
fine.
pizza.
Oh, sweet.
Oh,
We'll
well,
turn-
pizza, that's it.
We'll turn it into a sleepover like we used to, make it a 3-day weekend. We'll start on Friday, so that way you guys will already be here. You don't have to worry about going
All right,
home.
then we're in.
All right. Good deal. We'll do that. We'll cap out the week with a good old-fashioned sleepover, slumber party, chatting about our favorite movies. And come back tomorrow for minute number 65, where we are going to continue with Frank screaming as electricity dances, sparks fly, and everybody's going crazy. And then we'll stop with a girl looking down a well, singing a song to her flower. Until then.
Yes.
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 It was done before Harry Met Sally. Yes. Yes.
He was my boyfriend.
My parents thought he was my boyfriend.
Yes.